And there you are.
I don't know how successful I'll be.
Hey, TJ, this is Commissioner Scar. Can you hear me?
And can you hear me?
I can hear you. I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be traveling for the next probably 25 minutes, so I will just be listening only. So if you go through introductions, you don't hear from me, it's because I'm actually driving. Did you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Ask each person to their end market here,
Okay,
rather than having a thing.
she should probably be able to hear me now because I unmuted this, so.
Commissioner Scar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, TJ. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Okay, perfect. I think we're good.
Okay, I'm going to go on mute and just listen until I find a place to park on the other side of town.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so would you like me to mute it till
Can you
nine?
do that from here?
I can mute it from here, but I can't unmute it from here for some reason, yeah.
Hi, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
Sarah, imagine my disappointment when I realized yesterday wasn't Thursday and no Thursday night football.
I know. You know what? Thank you for messaging me. Yeah, and I'm sorry I haven't responded yet. Yeah. You know what though? Hey, now it's Thursday. It was like something to look forward to.
Yeah, now I got Thursday night football.
That's right. Who's playing tonight?
I don't know. It's football.
I am immersed in a 20-some page staff report for the Nature Conservancy for their restoration project in the Kilchis Valley, and I have to have it published today for the hearing next week. So I am here, but I gotta keep working while I listen. Yep. Remember those days, Bill?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You miss them, don't you?
You know, really, I do.
Hi, I know you. Yeah, you do. How are you?
This is the first Housing Commission meeting I have not attended in
I see your
person.
name pop up here all the time.
But good morning, Gail. I'm writing your staff report, so I'm here, but I'm listening.
Okay, I'm gonna do one more thing and then I'll be done. Sorry. I'm one to get pinched in the middle, so I'm like, gonna spare myself the pain. No.
I'm gonna go ahead and sign off.
Yeah.
Sarah's online today. And Commissioner Carr is online today as well?
Yep.
Okay. I did that right before I headed out this morning. I remembered, okay, I better get that. That's perfect.
If we got, can weigh in after that, but yeah, it's, so there's two things I felt. I felt a weight of responsibility and I felt an elation of joy because, yeah, so like reading all the things, not only just the units, but like the people that will be impacted and like, excited about this work. Which committee have you chosen?
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
We can go ahead and make sure that this projector is on properly. Is there a refresh button on this?
So they could all be on all of it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Do you know if any people are not going to be here in person?
We have a couple folks online. We've got Bill online, and I think we saw Tom Jarrett online as well. But I think we should take roll call just to make sure, like you normally do.
Okay, well, let's get started. It's on time. We have a pretty, hopefully we can get everybody. Maybe start out with introductions. TJ, you want to start off on the west side?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Oklahoma County Housing Coordinator. Really excited for our agenda, wrapping up a very important process. Thank you all for being here.
I'm Chris Lockenmeyer, and I'm representing not only the Thomas School District, but another employer in the county, yours. I need to. Ms. Carlton Thompson, nonprofit representative for Employee Engagement. And staff at Community Development.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The online folks.
So this is Bill. I can't hear what's going on.
Can you hear me, Bill?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I know what happened. The port phone got muted. Hang on just a sec. Let me send Lynn a message.
Right? Because I was like.
Yeah. Now tell me, what meeting have you ever been to that didn't have?
I'm
already sweating bullets because I got a big meeting this afternoon at college, and I'm like, hope everything goes right.
Murphy's Law adapted to technology, essentially.
For you. You guys are great. I can't use my own
For some reason,
computer.
it will not.
Sort of impenetrable firewalls.
It's not bringing me up.
This, yeah, I think this came off, which is why you don't have an input right now selected.
Open, at college, so I use your guys' computer.
Okay, we can hear fine now.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill. We're just getting our visual set back up on this end, and then we're going to go ahead through. Ed, they can hear you. We'll work quietly if you want to do roll call verbally.
Okay, I heard, Bill Bartline, Mr. Bartline?
Yep, retired Commissioner Bartline attending. I need to apologize. I missed the last Finance Committee meeting. My age is catching up with me, and I forgot what day it was.
Is Tom there? Tom there? Okay. And was Kristen online?
Yes, I am. Hi, I'm Kristen Koptiuk. I'm an at-large member. I'm on the Finance Committee and the Outreach Committee.
Sorry, I was muted. Tom Jarrett at large.
Okay. Anybody else from the citizenry? Hey, Valerie?
Valerie Schumann, member at large.
Kristen, I was just mentioning for Mission Minute, your work at Habitat for Humanity that I was aware of. You want to say a word about that? You muted?
I coordinated a group of volunteers from my Dragon Boat team, the Tide Runners in Nehalem, and several of us helped to, actually we helped to paint the entire outside of a house in Hebo by noon. It was great experience.
And they were sure glad to have you guys there.
Anybody else out there in,
Still not connecting, right? try HDMI too. There we go.
Yay.
Okay, who did I miss out there that's online with us? Go ahead and speak up.
This is Peter, Housing Commission nonprofit representative.
This is Lisa Briner. I'm not on the Housing Commission, but I applied for one of the grants, so I'm listening in today.
Good morning, everyone. Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development. I am also participating remotely today.
No? Great.
Briar Smith, Executive Director of Tillamook Habitat for Humanity.
Mark?
Peggy Schumann, just listening in today, couldn't make it to Tillamook. I applied for one of the grants, and it's always interesting to listen in. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've a lot of time to go through and talk about the grants. We're making a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on these 6 projects. The board has had time to review all of them. We've been very much circulated earlier by TJ. And I've had a chance to go through it. The Finance Committee has also reviewed these applications and made recommendations to our commission. So I guess, TJ, you want to talk a little bit quickly about the process and scoring, and then turn it over to Vince. My goal is that we spend our time on the ones that we have questions, and we don't spend a huge amount of time if there's unanimity among the group if we agree with the recommendation of the Finance Committee. So with that in mind, Liz goes through, we could start out by, she still needs to do a brief description for people that haven't had the opportunity to read the materials. But then if there's unanimity, then we'll just move on to the next one, then I'll say this better.
So the process, as you all remember, we went through our initial criteria, and we developed the criteria from within the Housing Commission. And we identified how the Finance Committee was going to apply that criteria. And then what we did is we launched our applications, and folks applied for the grants. That was the quantitative piece of information. When people applied for the form online, it told us how many acres they were developing on, how many units they were building, compared to how many units they actually could build. And that was the development efficiency. How much money they were asking for per unit. And that was really the investment efficiency. So there were a number of quantitative factors that were sort of set in stone once the applicants applied, and it was based on what they asked for and what they were doing. And then what we knew we wanted was some qualitative criteria. So 10 questions that essentially looked at things that housing commissioners could assign a 1 through 5 score on. And this is what you all did last month. You said, you know, if they had a lot of great green space there, they received a 5. If they didn't have any green space or a lot of, you know, maybe playgrounds or things like that, they received a 1. We also had some non-applicable responses because, you know, not everybody was able to put green space down. And so one of the things that we learned from this process, and keep in mind that this is a first time around learning process, one of the things we learned is that we want to make sure that we find a way to give points to people who might be disadvantaged in some of those qualitative areas as well. The important piece to keep in mind is that we averaged the scores from all 12 of the folks who responded last month. And what we had was essentially a 1 through 5 score for each of those 10 questions. And again, they were average. So if everybody gave a 5 on question 3, for example, that came out as a 5. If half of folks gave a 5 and the other one gave a 1, that really came out as a 3. So it was truly average. Those two scores were combined together. Now, I want to take a step back for a moment and talk about one of the things about the quantitative criteria that we were uncertain about. When a working group first formed, about a year before I started in my role, the idea was to assign a point per unit. Now, that very clearly created a disadvantage for the folks who really only had 3 to 5 units that they were putting on the ground, compared to folks who might have a couple of dozen units. And so one of the things that I proposed to this commission and that the Finance Committee chose to recommend, and this commission chose to recommend as well, which was that we did it as proportionality by the number of units on the site compared to how many units you could put on the site. And that was where that development efficiency metric came from. So I've added both scores, in fact, in the printouts for you. So you could see how it would have looked had we kept that initial scoring versus how it looked with this leveling. And so the folks who had small projects, their scores came up. And the folks who had really large projects, their scores came down a little bit. And so it really was a leveling effect. Those are the things that I want to go ahead and outline really quick. And so what happened is that those two scores, quantitative and qualitative, went in front of the finance committee. Now keep in mind, I think folks remember that we've had 3 developers who have done this before. They have been around the block, they know what a pro forma was, and they really, really had a polished presentation, as well as did a lot of their pre-development due diligence, because again, they're professional developers. They've done this before. They also submitted pro formas that were very detailed and gave us all the information that we could possibly need in terms of making sure that there truly is a gap there, that the need truly exists. The other 3 developers who came and worked with us today, or last month, and that we'll be talking about today, they're new. These are folks who haven't really done this stuff before. A couple of them are sort of, moving from builder to developer. And so when we talked about the term pro forma, I actually went through sort of a pro forma 101 with a couple of folks. I shared an Excel spreadsheet that they could use as a jumping off point to enter their own numbers so that we could level the playing field for folks. But even still, when we got pro formas from those 3 developers, we couldn't compare apples to apples across all 6 projects. Part of that, again, is because of the level of technical expertise that our really seasoned developers had. And the other piece of it is about what stage in development folks are at right now. So in general, and we'll see this in a few minutes, those other 3 developers who provided a pro forma that wasn't as clear in terms of identifying the gap, them are really in pre-development stage or procurement stage. They haven't even really started to buy materials, and there's a lot of wiggle room as far as where the numbers could go, moving on from this point. So these are estimates. So I want to ground this first off in the fact that the Finance Committee really took some time to dig into some important pieces about certainty when you talk about the applications themselves, where they are in the application process. How we felt that their numbers really broke down in terms of what they were asking for versus the AMI ranges that they were landing in, and some other important criteria that Ms. is going to talk to us about here in a few minutes, because Ms. guided us through that conversation. So in a moment, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. to talk a little bit about the Finance Committee process. But I just want to remind folks that today what we're doing is we're giving recommendations, just as Ed said a moment ago. These are not the final scores. These are not the final awards. That is what the Board of County Commissioners will be responsible for doing. What we are doing is we're giving them a foundation from which they can make their decision quantitatively as well as qualitatively. So, Ms., I wanted to hand this over to you to take a few minutes to talk about just the Finance Committee process, and then we'll circle back around, I think, to this when we dive into the Finance Committee pieces. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, thank you. So first, I want to say thank you to the folks that put a lot of time and energy and thought into this process, and we are learning as we go, and we're debriefing, and we will apply learning to the next go-around. But I do want to ground us in the fact that we are appointed members of a public body, like county commissioners and city council. So public meeting law does require us transparency in this process. We are not here to build consensus as commissioners. We're here to bring our perspective and our decision, and then when possible, we can share our reasoning around that. So this isn't in an effort to make sure that we all agree on a source. So that being stated, I did want to clarify with you, TJ, the 3 that we have are the 3 that we have. We don't have any additional or recommendations
For the Finance Committee? Right, because the only person that wasn't present was Bill. We have a 4-person Finance Committee, and then Bill mentioned he just had a scheduling snap. So it was the 3 out of the 4. However, all commissioners will have an opportunity to speak about each of these projects too. As we go through each project, I think that's a good idea. And if we don't want to accept the Finance Committee, if the whole commission doesn't want to accept the Finance Committee's recommendation, we can drill down and all commissioners can have a little bit of a say about what that project should look like.
Okay, thank you. So, our process was to go through each one of the applicants and weigh, how the applicant scored versus what the criteria was and why we had kind of, made that a criteria to begin with. And we also talked about the places where the criteria actually kind of worked possibly against applicants, but not in a way that was intended originally. And so that's where we were able to apply the qualitative principles to this in really thinking about, okay, that wasn't intentional, what do we really think? And so that's what a lot of the conversation was about, was just kind of weighing where the quantitative didn't quite hold up to what we qualitatively would like it to show as. And so I don't know if you want me to go as far as each applicant and like to the final summary, or?
Yeah, we can do that. I think after we can just do a quick summary. I love what you did. I really wanted to ground our
Okay, great.
conversation. And then I can go through a quick slide deck that I have that essentially captures what we have in our packets here. And then what I'd like to do is open it up for discussion on each one, and that's where you can guide sort of, I think, the conversation with commissioners about where the finance committee was thinking on the recommendation. Any questions from anyone? Does that make sense, or does anyone want to ask any clarifying questions?
Yes. TJ, this is Kristen. It would be helpful if you don't share your screen while we're just having a general discussion, because we can't see who's talking and what's going on.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. I'm actually launching into the presentation piece right now. So I'll continue sharing my screen, but I'll stop that as soon as we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about our first applicant, or actually a summary rather. So what we have here, and can folks do this fairly well?
I think our two guests in the rear probably cannot.
Yes, absolutely. I assume that's probably true. I was just going to say, we've got some extra agendas. There's also one next to Carrie, if you want to grab that.
Right here.
Oh, we've already got it covered. So right here is just part of our PowerPoint slide deck. What I'm showing you is a summary of the first three and then also a summary of the next three. I would have put all six together, but that would have been way too big of a sheet to try to see. So what we looked at was, of course, the name, the doing business as, the number of acres on the site, the amount requested from each applicant, that development efficiency that we talked about a few moments ago, the number of units allowed versus the number of units that are put on the site, that's what that is. Whether it's a multi-phase development or not. If you recall, if it is a multi-phase development, there's less certainty that that second or third phase will come to fruition. What stage of development folks are at, whether they're pre-development or all the way to construction. There are 5 different phases, if you recall. And also the investment efficiency. So up to $20,000 per unit is what this fund will provide for an applicant. They get more points the lower dollar amount that they're asking, and fewer points for greater dollar amount. There's also whether they receive any other type of award. So was it a grant from the government or a private entity, and was it more than what they were asking from us or less? That was the other really important piece as well. Called those gap sources, for those of you who are familiar with that. And then what's the affordability commitment? We wanted to know if they have affordability commitment for that grant or resource that they got from other folks. And if they do, they got 1 point for each 10 years that's required. And then what's their affordability commitment? This is section 3. What's their affordability commitment with the Housing Commission? Up to 30 years as well. And then what we did is we broke down how many units from all 6 applicants fall into each of the buckets of affordable area median income ranges. So looking at that left column, what I did again is that left column is the same for these 2 slides right here. So they're the same for slide 1 and slide 2. What I want to show you is in that section 1 column where it says summary, we had a total of 13.07 acres in all 6 applicants coming forward with their 6 properties. There was a total request of 1.263 million. We had a development efficiency across all projects average at about 90%. So of those 6 sites, about 90% of those sites are being used for the amount of housing that they can maximize and have on site, I was really impressed by that. The total number of units we're talking about here across the 6 projects is 87 units. So that's very impressive. Also, the average across all 6 projects in terms of investment efficiency was 16,000. So also, I think a pretty solid number. We also noticed that if you look at section 3, in terms of affordability commitment, the average was 22 years. So also, it looks like we're going to have 87 units on average here for about 22 years on the ground if we're able to bring these projects to fruition. It's very exciting. No units above 120% AMI, although it was allowed. None of our applicants asked to pull any of those units outside of the affordability ranges for which they would receive points. So that's also exciting. All 87 units are going to be affordable at least to 120% AMI of the workforce and below. We have 25 units that are at the 81 to 120% AMI. For folks, for just a quick reminder, that's the upper end of the workforce housing range. We have 38 units in the 61 to 80% AMI. That's the low income range. That's also the lion's share of these units. You sort of look at this on a chart, it's a nice bell curve. I think this is a really good distribution of what we're doing with these finances. And under 60% AMI, those folks that are really struggling within our community, that's affordable housing. That's what the federal government and state calls affordable housing. We have 24 units there. So about the same number, in fact, that we have at the 80 to 120% range. So the total quantitative points and qualitative points looking across all projects is broken down here as well, just to give you a sense of the average was 74 for quantitative. And the average total points for qualitative was 38. Now remember, there were 10 questions with 5 points each, so the most that anybody could have had on a qualitative score was 50. So an average of 38 out of 50 is pretty solid here. And then what we also have is the recommendations from each of the housing commissioners. And you can see just very quickly, we broke it down with the first applicant really receiving about 100% of their requests. The second applicant as well, the same thing. The third applicant, we're looking at, for some reason this is not following along with my screen. The third applicant, we're looking at a total of, for some reason my screen is acting weird. It's not matching what's on the projector, so my apologies. 73% for that third applicant. That would be, correct. Our 4th, 5th, and 6th applicants, we decided, the Finance Committee decided 100% for applicant 4, 17% for applicant 5, as well as 17% for applicant 6. So what we're going to do now is go through each applicant one at a time. There are 3 pages in your packet for each applicant. 4. So all of the pieces broken down. At the very bottom, so on page 1, just past your agenda, where it says Multifamily Rental Housing Fund, Complete Application 1. You'll notice down at the bottom, the left column shows the quantitative points that would have been received if we gave them a point per unit. That would have been 146 points for applicant 1. Looking at the as percentage of project, that brings it down to 94. A total of 140 points for this applicant. And so I wanted to hand this over to me because what I want to point out is on the second page is qualitative, and on the third page is a summary, how that applicant compares to the mean that we talked about a few moments ago. And each applicant is compared to the mean on its third page. And so Ms. do you want to kind of guide us through a conversation about this applicant and open up the floor for discussion?
Yes, and I would love to invite Kristen and Chris to hop in at any point along the way if I've missed something, or if I'm not guiding this the way that it feels right. So with applicant one, we really did go through piece by piece how, where they were coming in percentage and score-wise on each of the quantitative criteria.
Yeah, excuse me, if you were to take the screen off, or,
Also, I have this one right here. Thank you. I'm advancing on my computer, but it's not doing it here, which is interesting.
why that's for the people that are watching,
That's the discussion portion maybe.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I can just put it back up for each applicant. I think that makes sense.
Go ahead.
And so as we're talking about the development efficiency and looking at the percentage, like that felt, there were times that doesn't necessarily mean 100% was the right thing to do. I'm going to list the example of in this particular project where Kevin explained that they could have gone for 100%, but they would have had 2 more studios versus having a duplex, which then could serve a family. So we really wanted to take that into consideration in a qualitative way. Also, multi-phase development, and Chris, you had better verbiage around this, but basically like the likelihood, the surety that the project was going to be in completion. So if we get to the point where it's already, ground is broken and we're already into construction, that qualitatively felt like a stronger piece. And then just really it's coming to the actual ask itself, how that translated to how much would be received per unit. There was, when you break it down that way, there were some discrepancies when you looked at the quantitative values and then the amount being asked for, that did impact the percentage as well. Because there was, comparatively, people asked for amounts that they were asking for. It wasn't specific to a guideline necessarily. And when we did go over gap, like TJ was saying, there were some that it was very clear we could point almost to a number and be like, yeah, there's that gap. And there were others that we just really have no idea. And so that we couldn't really put a qualitative measure on. The affordability was something that, when you're committing to 30 years on all or at least some of your units, that has an impact on the application versus 20 or 10. And also the level of income required to be able to afford in those units. So that was also a qualitative criteria that folks applied in this process. And I think really when we went through each of the quantitative points, we shared kind of some of the learnings that we had as we were going along. And then qualitatively, we each had an opportunity to share our percentage of asks that we would recommend. So, and all for different reasons why we might have had the score that we had. And we did share those with each other and did talk them through. But I think that was kind of a stretch in a way from going from quantitative, talking about qualitative, and then trying to transition into putting a percentage on there. That was challenging in some of the requests. And so I know we had a lot of discussion around that and, definitely a lot of learning for the next process. So in this, do you want me to review then what the final recommendation was for each? Or?
Yes, I think that would be great.
Okay, so for applicant one, then 100% of funding is recommended, which is a total of $300,000. And do we want to pause for questions for each one before we move on? So does anyone have any questions, comments for applicant one before we move to applicant two?
The question is, it doesn't pertain to the applicant, okay, but as far as the recommendation, does that any allowance or was there anything made in regards to what money was going to be available in this program?
No, thank you, that's a really good point. So that was made clear at the very beginning that we would not know how much was available, nor should we make our recommendation based upon the amount available, but based on the merits of each application as we went through it. Thank you, very good point, thank you. so we're just strictly on the merit of the application.
Okay. I can comment on that very briefly. So it'll be up to the Board of County Commissioners to determine the amount of money that's available and how much money is going to be allocated from that finite pool to each of these applicants. This is guidance for them to make that decision. But in the end, we do have a certain number of dollars available. And also, some of these projects are going to get maybe some money, not all that they're asking for, but that's certainly going to be a pivot point for them to go leverage those dollars. And so there are opportunities even for folks that aren't receiving 100%, whether it's from our recommendation or the BOCC's decision.
So in the total, there will be about 2/3 of what the budget is on all of these allocations, if we have them.
We'll share budget numbers in this coming month. Right now, what we want to do is be very, very intentional about it's the absolute value for each project based on its own merits, independently. We're not basing these decisions based on how much money is available. We're going to act as if each applicant could receive 100% of its ask. And again, we're basing it on what they told us.
Any other questions or comments, or anyone online have anything they want to add?
Jerry, you might want to take that up the screen again so that the folks online can see it. I think they want to be able to hear us.
Yes, that's not sharing.
Oh,
I'm not sharing. That's just on our screen for us.
oh, okay.
But I could actually show, well, I don't want to show us. I think what we were gonna do is ask for an up-down vote for each of the project's recommendations from the Finance Committee. If it's a down vote, then we'll have a deeper discussion about what the full Housing Commission wants to allocate for a project. Does that make sense, everyone? Great. Ed, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, well, we'll start with, application, one, with, Kevin Shula. Is there, anybody support it? Any, no vote on recommendation from the, advisory committee? Anybody online, commission members?
So you might entertain a motion to approve the Finance Committee's recommendation.
Can I have a motion, to approve the finance committee's recommendation? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, well, you saved it about 20 minutes.
I'm not sure if online they're able to hear and follow that process.
Ed, can you go ahead and call online, and I will take, or Lynn, can you take note of who responds?
It's really hard to hear Ed.
I'll speak up.
You've got this information, you're gonna be seeing them.
Yeah, you've got it. I'll go ahead and do that right here. So I got a brand new computer this month. Oh, Lord. This is, not wanting to play nicely with me. Hold on, I have to know what's going on now. Okay, maybe that was too long.
So, expedite these meetings, people could use their reactions and do the thumbs up and do a voting rather than roll call.
There we go. Yeah.
Kristen, are you a thumbs up on that last vote? Okay, that's a yes. Let's see, anybody else? Tom, are you a thumbs up on that last vote?
Yes.
Okay, so we're unanimous on that one.
Peter on there.
Oh, is Peter on? Oh, okay, Peter.
Yes.
Let the record show that, all commission members voted in favor of the recommendation from the Finance, Advisory Committee on application number 1. So, on application 2, Ms.
Okay, so application 2 is Darren Murphy, and we same criteria was applied. Just wanting to point out the fact that it is a 30-year commitment, and the AMI levels are 60 and below, 61 to 80 and 80. And so based upon that review, the recommendation is 100% funding at $120,000. Anyone have any questions they would like to go to?
I'd point out too, the investment efficiency for this project, 5,000 per unit, which stood out for us.
Yeah, that's actually where Darren got a lot of his point.
Yep.
Was from that investment efficiency. And doing it at the lowest affordable income range, which is fairly impressive.
Yeah, is there a motion to approve the finance committee's recommendation on application 2? All those in favor, either say, raise your hand or thumbs up if you're on the screen. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, looks like that one's unanimous as well. Finance committee 2, initiative is 0.
All right.
You guys are on a roll here.
I'm sorry, I was not prepared for that scoring criteria.
Get used to it.
Okay, application 3, Peggy Schumann. And we have, on here, the piece that we went over was the 80% efficiency. This did end up being a multi-phase. I think we did decide multi-phase, correct, because of the 5th unit. And so the 5th unit is not completed yet for inhabitable, but the 4 units are at that stage. And the investment efficiency is at 19,000. This is a 10-year affordability commitment. And I'm looking at the wrong page, so I'm really sorry. And then we are
We should be looking at multifamily rental housing on complete application 3.
under section 3, affordability, on the summary number of, oh, okay, I'm looking at the average, that's my apologies. So 10-year affordability commitments, and then we have 3 of those at 81% to 120, and then 1 from 61 to 80. And so we did have an average total of 73% funding on this one, and there were a variety of different reasons for that. So I guess what questions and comments do.
So I'll just share that this applicant, as well as the next one, I think, we had a lot of conversation about our metrics and what it meant. And I can just share about my 100%, right? So for me, I was excited about this project because they had really shown a commitment to doing this work even without support from other people. And for me, and maybe it's just my career and what I've been at, when I looked at the amount that they were requesting, it didn't seem like a lot to me. And I knew that there was people ready to move in there. So for me, maybe it was an emotional, decision, but when they were in here, I was pretty impressed that they had gone as far as they had without any other support. And I was, I don't think the years of affordability affected my score as much as maybe it did yours, Miss, or Kristen. And so for me, it was, these are smaller developers, less like the first 2 applicants we saw, right? Maybe less polished in their presentation, but I think that their commitment to providing housing in their community was very evident to me. So that's why I think I am 100%.
When I read through this, I was disappointed not to see 100% recommendation for this particular project because I feel so strongly about the benefit to healthcare RNs and, medical providers that can provide memory care and specialty care in North County. It's a desert, and it's a huge need, and there's potentially 40 minutes available tomorrow, practically, to fill that need. And so I felt pretty passionate and emotional about, yes, it doesn't meet all the criteria, but it does meet a huge need that we have in a way that can be really expeditious. So that was my thinking.
As a comment, it just seems like the phase of construction as well, I mean, that it's in the construction phase. I would wait that a little heavier, based on the fact that we have inflation versus more on a speculation side of the thing, but I think the rest of it will be, huge.
If I could say too, and I have to have a caveat that Rob Schmidt, my brother and Peggy, my sister-in-law, that they took what would be called a zombie building of, and in a drug-infested kind of hidden corner in Wheeler, and they battled their way to protect and made a safe living environment, that they put a fence on the backside where there is an obvious drug house. They worked with law enforcement and really battled it. I think part of the reason they've been able to even make progress is my brother's a contractor in the income. So, excuse my little blush here. I know I may be speaking out of school, but they didn't stick to that story, and I know there's still a price to pay, but they just didn't give up. And they've made it really, they've added something to the community, even in the not complete, they put single siding on the outside, but they didn't have to go to that expense, and the drainage problems, because he's smart about it, so thanks for letting me get a little bit more of the backstory.
Good point to share too, is if folks remember, very early on, I think it was only my second month here or something like that, I received a phone call from Peggy and said, hey, we're doing this thing, and the outreach committee immediately, wrote an article and talked about the cool things they're doing up there, both in terms of the impact on the neighborhood, but also, in terms of revitalizing a new home, which is great. We shine some light on this. But then, coming back to the quantitative and the qualitative pieces, I think those are really where the finance committee was focusing. Before we move to a vote, we could discuss, or if folks had questions, we could talk a little bit about the thinking for this story.
I would like to just share my thoughts. So all of the things that have been stated, I've taken into consideration and greatly appreciate the work that they have done. They talked about the fact that they had to hold the project until they had enough money raised on their own to then begin building again. Like, that was not lost on me at all. I think what really, where my little bit lower percentage came from is the amount of the ask for the number of units that are being produced, so the size of the project. And so I agree with all the things that have been said here, and I greatly appreciate these folks. But also, many of the quantitative criteria that were put in place and agreed upon by this commission did not necessarily meet the average. And so in the due diligence that we were doing as the finance committee, that was the reasoning behind mine, because when you take their total ask divided by number of units, it's a significantly higher amount than the amount per unit on other applications. Share that piece. That does not mean that I'm I'm not gonna dig my heels in here. I'm hearing what everyone's saying, and I appreciate the input.
Got Tom Jarrett with the hand raised, and we might want to take this.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to hear everybody, but I'm probably going to echo what many people have said. While if you look on my chart, my average number comes out to 2 because there's a lot of items they're not a sophisticated developer and that didn't meet the criteria. However, if I were on the finance committee, just my gut reaction would have been 100%. So that period.
Thank you, Tom.
Kristen, do you want to chime in here? Kristen, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I would really like to say something about the whole process, but we're converting everything into these percentages, and we're qualifying our discussion by qualitative criteria, which we keep trying to force into quantitative numbers and measurements. And that's always a really difficult task. So, you know, we were kind of pressured to come up with a percentage of what our score would be for each of these applicants. And some, you know, were very easy to do and others were complex, as was this one. And my gut feeling, since Tom was talking about gut feelings, and this is a completely subjective, non-qualitative criteria, it is that the ask per unit was really high. The amount of years in commitment was only 10, which is pretty low. And the point scores are low. I appreciate the difficulty of the project, the importance of it. Every single project encountered difficulties. Every single project is really important. There are people waiting to live in every single home on this list, not just in Wheeler, but everywhere. So to me, those kind of reasons weren't as powerful as the finance being asked for. And I know that Peggy Schumann is a small developer, not really a developer, but they didn't really have the wherewithal to apply for other funds like all the other ones did, or almost all the other ones did. And that's a matter of knowledge and savvy, and something that maybe the Housing Commission can help people to go after in future, because we certainly don't have enough money to finance everything by the Housing Commission. We need to draw on additional funds. And the Schumans put in their own money, which is really commendable. But it's not the only option. And I really think we need to show applicants to future funds that they've got to go after additional funds besides their own pocketbook and the Housing Commission's. So my score may seem a little low there. I don't think that devalues the merits of the project, but comparatively, that was my take.
I'll just say, when I saw the scoring, my initial reaction was disappointment that it wasn't 100%. And my follow-up reaction to that was, well, this would allow them to get at least one or two of these units completed and rented, and then they can, you know, get the funding they need to finish the other units. So it may not be as efficient, but it gives them, you know, an avenue to that. And so that was kind of the way that I basically justified that. If that's the same recommendation that everybody wants to support, that's just my added thoughts and rationale for the recommendation.
And I just wanted to add the fact that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that once we moved it to a multi-phase project, that there is a possibility of seeking additional funds in another round, because it's not a complete project. So that was another thing
That may be possible. When we start structuring the criteria for our next round, we'll talk about that, because there's just one unit left in that multi-phase project to be built out in that second phase. So the question is, well, would it actually qualify for a multifamily rental housing loan if it's only the one unit left? So that is for a future conversation, but that's just a little bit of the rationale. One thing I want to share really quickly, I really appreciate the robust conversation introduced here by Kristen, because we have a quantitative piece. That's really easy to follow, right? They just fill out the application and out spits out a number, and none of us really argue with that. It's what they told us. Then there's the qualitative piece. This is what we call mixed methods research. So in my background, I did a lot of work on decision science. And one of the things that we do is we have quantitative information that helps us identify stuff. And once you start adding in qualitative, what that means is that each individual is going to interpret those pieces, even the quantitative pieces, differently. They're going to weigh them in their brain differently. We call that an affective decision. It's called the affect heuristic, if you want to get kind of nerdy about it. And what that means is that in the end, we're going to have a gut check We're gonna take the quantitative stuff, we're gonna take the qualitative stuff, and we're gonna check our gut. And the fact that we're averaging these scores across all individuals means that no one individual's gut check is the recommendation that goes to the Board of County Commissioners. So it is truly a mixed methods approach, and one that we can revisit when we go into the next round. Do we want to stick with this? Do we want to tweak something? So I really appreciate Kristen's comments and Miss sort of helping to expand on what it is we didn't want.
If I may just point out that, there are some grant processes where the scoring is a point, and if you're 1 point above somebody else, you get the grant, and if you're 1 point below, you don't. This process is not like that.
But it's still dispensable.
Yeah.
And that is the most important piece. When we start adding in qualitative information, we need to defend decisions. We're talking about a lot of money, and we're giving county commissioners as much information as possible in order to make their final decisions. So this is important work, and thank you all.
If I could just add to that, it's impossible to quantify some of these values. Changing the community culture and atmosphere that instills pride in the neighborhood, I don't know how you score that. And I, it's gonna be different depending on other factors that are coinciding with that. So I feel like it's very important not to have, and to be okay with the fact that this is not some perfect science, because that hasn't really worked out great for some of us in the past, and that's why we're being innovative and, creative and working outside of the box a little bit, keeping some guardrails on it, but also allowing that flexibility of thinking, and rationale for why we're making these investments.
Okay, are we at a point where we can take a motion to, approve the recommendation, excuse me, of the Finance Advisory Committee? Budget? Want to make a motion?
Every sort of waiting for Michelle to say it. So I move to approve the recommendation.
Favor, say aye, or raise your hand if you're on the screen.
Aye.
Aye.
Peter, are you there? Are you an aye?
Yeah, I did a thumbs up. Sorry.
Okay.
Any opposed? Can you check?
Yeah. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Megan, do you want to speak to that? It's perfectly your choice. You don't have to, but I'm just curious.
Looking at the numbers,
Yeah.
that's what we're strictly going off of.
Well, yeah.
And, yeah, and they don't, they want to move on.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really important for us all to know moving forward, understand what people are thinking and want.
Hey, TJ, this is Commissioner Scar. Can you summarize the comments in the room as they're being made? Because online, I'm really getting nothing except the people that are really close to the microphone. And I feel like this is really important conversation, especially as I'm going to be one of the commissioners, I'll be representing both the Housing Commission and, of course, myself as a commissioner when this goes to the commissioners. So it's really important that the richness of conversation, I think, is shared with those of us online. Thank you.
Yes. Absolutely. And I want to invite Ed and Miss to add any pieces that I might not capture. I'm going to summarize briefly for Commissioner Scar. We talked about the fact that this is the first application that we're recommending to not receive 100%. A couple of the pieces that we're focused on was the fact that there's a high ask in terms of the dollars per unit. The folks didn't go ask for money elsewhere. And also it's a multi-phase project, so there's one unit that'll be added later on. They may be able to come back for more funding in the future. Were there any other pieces, Ed or Miss, that you wanted to include in that? And while you're speaking, I'm going to try to reposition this phone closer to the center.
I'm wondering if, Megan, if you would want to repeat, I'm wondering if maybe they didn't hear what you had to say. Are you okay doing that? Sure. Okay.
The reason for my vote is because, strictly based on the numbers, it just doesn't add up. And I mean, I'm all for housing, don't get me wrong, but the numbers just don't add up and go with all the applicants we have.
Thank you, Megan. Were you able to hear that, Commissioner Scar, and others online?
I think so. I don't know who was speaking, but someone said the numbers don't add up, but I'm not clear what that means. So we are really struggling to hear the, the intent here.
Okay, in the room right now, what's happening is they're repositioning the speakers, so we're hopefully gonna have better sound quality. Up to this point, were you able to hear Michelle's comment?
No, I actually did not hear Michelle's comments at all.
So, Michelle?
Yeah, so I had a couple of different thoughts. My initial disappointment in not seeing 100% stemmed from the proximity of this project to the medical services provided through the Reinhardt Clinic and Halem Valley Care Center, and their desperate need for employee housing, and the fact that they're understaffed in part because people cannot find housing that have to move here because we don't have enough of that type of credentialed workforce already living in the community. So that was a huge motivator for me in supporting this project, despite some of the other lower scoring quantitatively. For example, the developer expertise and some of those other pieces, I was overlooking those because of a community need in terms of employer and healthcare workforce housing. But that being said, I was also willing to accept the recommendation to not fully fund this project because it should be enough to allow them to complete at least one or two of the units and then generate the revenue from that to fulfill completion of the other units, recognizing it's not as efficient, but it is another option. And to Kristen's point earlier, we do need to get people thinking about how can I make this work? We're not all going to have all the money we want to do everything we want when we want. So what's the next, what's plan B, what's plan C? How do we fill the gaps, get creative, change our timeline, change our expectations, that kind of thing. So that was my thinking.
I think
The
everybody.
other comment you made was about the neighborhood and the qualitative part,
Yes.
which I thought was super important.
Yeah, so the scoring, it's been acknowledged that some of this is subjective, and my last example, case in point, but yeah, when we're trying to score something that isn't scorable, like how people feel about the neighborhood they live in, it is correlated to community vitality, economic health, individual health, but there's no point score that we can really put on that that's going to be what do I want to say, objective. So there is some degree, some need for subjectivity in this process, in my opinion, because of that.
Can someone explain to me, we keep talking about the high per unit for this one. Isn't everybody at 19 or 20,000 per unit? Am I missing right there being called out?
So if you notice, next on that page, application 3, in fact, you're looking at it right here.
Yes.
I've added the average investment efficiency across projects next to it. So the average was 16,000.
Yes,
Our lowest was 5,000. And these folks are asking for 19,000.
but I'm seeing 20 on the ones we've looked at so far, right? I'm seeing 20,000 per unit.
No, the applicant one, just to quickly.
16, and then.
Right, so
then
first one
five.
was 20,000. The second one, I believe, was significantly less.
Application 4 is 20,
Two.
5 is 20, and 6, I think, is different, right? So, so they're 19 and we have 3 at 20, so they're not overly, out of line with the other, with 3 other proposals.
So what we have is number 1 at 16.
Uh-huh.
We have number 2
5,
at 5.
right?
And then number 3 is our
19.
first one, our highest so far at 19.
Uh-huh,
And then we do have 20 for the other. So that's where the average of 16 comes from.
I gotcha.
Okay, I think everybody needs to talk obnoxiously loud for the benefit of our online people.
Can you hear us, Commissioner Starr?
I was able to hear that, yes. And I think if we can make sure that when someone is making comments, if you have to move closer to the microphone or you need to speak, as Ed said, ridiculously loud. But it's really helpful. This is important conversation. I really appreciate everybody's thoughts and putting on the table, you know, how it's occurring to you, because this is the first time we've ever done this. And we're trying to figure out how do we come up with a process that really fits. And everything that's being said here today is so important in the development of this process that I don't want to miss any of it. And I'm so sorry I couldn't be there today. But yeah, if we can just have people speak ridiculously loud and or move toward the microphone if you're going to make significant comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Go ahead, Mitch.
All right, well, I just want to make sure that we wrap up this applicant. Is there anything else you wanted to add, and any comments or?
No, I think we've had a great discussion and appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we are on applicant 4 now. We are on applicant 4 now, and this applicant is Lisa Greiner. And when we reviewed, this application, you know, we did note the fact that 90% of the efficiency was achieved. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. 100% of the efficiency was achieved on this applicant. And 20,000 per unit is being asked for. The affordability commitment is 20 years. And the units, will fall either between 81 to 120, 3 of the units, and 1 of the units will fall between 61 and 80% AMI. The recommendation was 100% funding on this project. What comments or questions does anyone have?
I think I'd make a motion to approve. I think we're there with this. Does it make sense to folks?
I know, I'm excited about it as a downtown project. I used to be on the Oregon Downtown Development Association board, and boy, these kind of projects were just gems to get them going. So I'm going to be in favor. So I have a motion.
Yeah, make a motion.
Oh.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Tom?
Aye.
Okay. Peter?
I'm an aye.
Okay, I think that's everybody. That's unanimous. Great project, I'm excited.
And there's more that can be done in Tillamook of this same kind of project.
Yeah.
Maybe get people to work towards that. Yeah.
Great example.
Something to mention for the finance committee and then also for the legislative committee as we start talking about other opportunities in the future. Lisa's project is a great example of a property tax exemption that exists in enabling legislation, but has not been implemented in any of our local jurisdictions. And this is primarily for cities. It's called the Vertical Housing Development Zone Property Tax Exemption. And it offers some significant discounts and, you know, exemptions actually on those taxes that folks have to pay if they're building above commercial. Now, that's one of those laws that passed just a few years ago, again, through enabling legislation that could be implemented in the future. So as we think about opportunities and we think about ways that we provide technical assistance to our cities, this is one of the things to keep in mind for the future.
So applicant 5 then, moving on. Okay, so applicant 5 is Tyler Brogdon, and this project had 67% efficiency with 20 units being proposed in an area that would allow for 30 units. This is a multi-phase project and it's in pre-development, so these were all criteria that came up that were discussed at length. The request is for 20,000 per unit, and 4 of the units would be for 81 to 120 AMI, and then 16 of the units would be for 61 to 80% AMI, and the recommendation average is for 17%, for a funding recommendation of $66,000 $167. Are there any comments or questions about applicant 5?
I can make one point of order that I think is helpful as folks think through this. One is that this is a multi-phase development. The first phase is the 20 units. There will probably be an application through this body for more funding in the future. Remember, he had property for maybe 3 months. And so he's gonna build out those first 20 units in phase 1, and then he's gonna be looking at the other 10 units that are allowed to make up total of 30 in phase 2. So several years from now, probably 2, 3, 4 years from now, we could expect to see another application from this applicant that shows a very similar 10 units, multi-phase, closer construction, because some of that stuff will be in phase.
It's a pre-development phase, so the amount, in going through their pro forma, did you see very much, how close are they acting to the pro forma in terms of their needs for financial support?
Pro forma can't really be used with crystal clarity because we're so early in the process. The city of Bay City has voted to take some of their system development charges and create an extension from their main trunk line essentially to where that property is so that Tyler can go about 150 feet to a lift station and connect to it. So that's not investment in the project, it's just public infrastructure being invested to make the project come to fruition. So that's one point to keep in mind.
I think it's key that he's, for the first time, has gotten support from the city of Bay City, which has not been seen in all my years around here, and development in these kind of areas with no infrastructure, to see us supporting that kind of initiation into an area, I've got goosebumps, so yeah, it's one of the
Since you had a little higher percentage than the others, what was your thoughts?
I was really impressed with the amount of collaboration that's happening early on and getting Bay City on board to make some major structural investments, not only for this project, but it's leading and opening doors for others down the road, which I thought was very exciting. And I see this as an investment. The funds that we're recommending can be used to then seek matching funds from other sources and really help move this project along. And honestly, like the livability in the neighborhood that is being proposed here just really speaks to me. There's a level of dignity in that type of lifestyle that is not always available to folks. And I'm just really grateful. Plus, I would love to live on that hill looking down over that beautiful, bay extension there. So, just wanted to know that.
Well, Chris or Tom?
Yeah, not specifically to Tyler Brogdon, although that was one of them. I just want to mention that I did take pictures of my votes that I handed in on our sheets, and several of mine were not accurately reflected on the votes and the list of who voted how much for which particular item. So I just wanted to mention that. It hasn't affected the outcome of anything so far, but they weren't accurately reflected.
Thank you, Tom. There's a piece that I should have included earlier on when we were framing our discussion and grounding ourselves for moving forward. So some folks put in the box for a specific question, a 1/5, right? And so you put two numbers in there. And what we did is we made an objective decision and said, okay, these numbers are gonna get average. If you really weren't certain, or if you were throwing two numbers in there for whatever reason, the two pieces in your mind that are sort of balancing, we took the 1, the 5, and that became a 3. So that's essentially 6 divided by 2, right? So we
yeah, excuse me, of course, that's obvious. If you put a 1/5 in, you gotta somehow make a decision. That's not my issue. My issue was where, I had 4 5s and only 2 5s were registered. So, but anyway, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but just people ought to be aware.
Thank you. We'll check that at the office, and if there's a need for clarification, I'll send out an email for folks. Thank you for putting a pin in that for me, Tom.
Okay, anybody else online want to make a comment?
Karen.
Oh, Commissioner Scar.
Thank you. I was just kind of curious as to how this application served for a pre-development project. I'm wondering, just looking at the very low percentage, I'm wondering if it would make sense into the future to actually develop a pre-development version, because there's so much of this that is difficult to apply, and yet I know we're all very excited about, you know, this project and where it may go in the future. So just maybe this isn't the place for that, but just was curious for those of you that did the work, what were your thoughts?
Commissioner Scar, I think what you're asking is why was it categorized as pre-development? Can you maybe clarify your question, please?
No, I completely understand why. My question is to those who worked through the application on this project, if that felt like it worked for you and you think you got to where we need to be, or was this really difficult to put a square peg in a round hole? So it's to the committee, please.
So, Aaron, I can address my 10%. So when I looked at all of the 6 projects, and for me, a criteria was certainty and being able to really look at the numbers. And we didn't really have solid numbers because it's so early in this project. So when you know, you can see where I went 100% on things I felt more certain on, and this one, I picked 10%.
Yes, certainty was definitely a piece of it. It was the ability to use the funds that are awarded towards seed money for other funding, and then it was also the potential for a future ask on a later phase in the project. So for me, that I didn't feel like that was too difficult in this process, but I do appreciate the comment, Commissioner Scar, because it allows us the opportunity to go back and look at criteria and how we're putting the applications out. I think there's a dozen other points that have us doing the same thing for the next go round, like we're reviewing other things that have come up.
Commissioner Scar, are you? Kristen's got her hand up. Oh, Kristen, excuse me.
Well, I was basically going to say just the same thing. The early phase of the project was definitely important in my low score for that project. And I think it's a great project. It's just not very far along to be asking for this max amount per unit. I think we need to see a little more and encourage the developer to also partner with other funders. But it's really important to, I think one of the things we talked about in our group discussion in the Finance Committee was also the importance of leverage, that somebody who gets a small amount of money from the Housing Commission, even if it's, you know, not their whole ask, especially this early in a project, can use that amount as leverage for applying for other funding. So by just saying, no, we won't give them any money, we didn't say that at all. We said, let's give them an encouraging amount so that they can go forward with the project and lean on the Housing Commission for leveraging other funds.
I was just going to say more to Commissioner Scar's point. I feel like this is apples and oranges, a little bit in the, you know, trying to compare a pre-development project to ones that are closer to completion, and it felt like the square peg in the round hole. But also, it felt really great to see the full gamut of project possibilities. I also think Tyler is a rock star. I was exceptionally proud to have somebody in the community that's working that hard at his age and his stage of his own career. And I wanted desperately to do something to support him so he knows that we support him and that he has backing in the community to keep forging ahead. Because if it isn't for people like him doing what he's doing, we won't solve this problem. So I'm excited to see that there is a path forward for some support for him, but I also feel like we need to look at so much of the go, no-go is environmental studies and all these things that are hurdles that have get, and they become insurmountable barriers for people even starting projects. And so, given the topography and environmental challenges that we have in Tillamook County, we do need to have some sort of a funding mechanism that's established and gives people more confidence in bringing project ideas forward and helps them leverage that seed funding to get the project off the ground. Because so I feel really good about this. I feel like it maybe could have even been closer to like 100,000, knowing how expensive some of those things are that he's got to get through to make sure to get to that certainty, that viability of the project. But anyway, I feel good about the fact that we're doing something to support him.
We've talked about having a program like you described for pre-development, and maybe that'll be on our work plan to have a separate program with criteria in the future.
And I'd like to tie your report out actually for Development Code Committee and some of the stuff we're working on right now. When we are able to do some of our own due diligence and know a little bit more about the site in question, we can speak with more clarity about a pre-development fund. Right now, this is our first time around, and I think we can appropriately gauge the level of certainty, whether the project's even going to move forward, and whether cost overruns are going to happen. Remember, if cost overruns go really high, and those AMI ranges have to go above the 120%, there are those clawback mechanisms here. So we want to balance certainty with the ability to give somebody a pivot point to leverage some funding to get some more. And so those are my comments on that.
Commissioner Scar, were you able to pick up those comments?
It was. Thank you very much. I appreciate the thoughts, because I also agree pre-development is definitely a key. And I just was curious if we had created a process that gave it its due, or if it really a process that made it difficult. But it sounds like the process actually did work to get to where people feel good about. So thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation from the Finance Committee for application 5.
Okay, all in favor, say aye, or online variant.
Aye.
Aye.
Peter?
I'm sitting here on mute, so I'm going to get chuckles again from my vote, but yes.
You're in trouble, Peter.
Oh, I am always in trouble.
I don't think there were any nays, if we want to check.
Yeah, any nays, good point. Okay,
Can I also just note that we haven't consistently done that, so are there any nays we missed on any previous votes?
Did we miss that in the first two?
Okay, just wanted to make sure we have measured.
That was on the third one. We caught it that night. Thank you for catching that.
Thanks, everyone. All right, moving to application 6. This is Nathaniel Palmer. Let's see. So they have 100% development efficiency. This is not a multi-phase development. They are in pre-development. They're asking $20,000 per unit. We have 10-year affordability on this project and 12 units proposed at the 61 to 80% AMI. And the average total recommendation is 17% and for a total of $40,000. Are there any comments or questions from anyone?
And I have a few, some of the things we've been talking about that are coming up about community livability. I'm starting to hear some public outcry against this project. It is a very dense housing project in the middle end of their downtown, Bay City's downtown, of which there's not any more commercial space there available. Over the years, apartment and multi-density housing has not been allowed under the zone. It's a commercial zone. So they're going to have to go for a zone change on this. In my experience of in a commercial zone, it's approved for mixed use or outright commercial. And I think when you put this kind of density in the middle and take away downtown commercial space, we're making a statement that we're supporting this, and I frankly cannot, especially as I'm hearing even unsolicitedly, people are talking to me about, have you heard about this dense project going next to the landing in front of the Bay City Community Arts Center. So I just want to go on the record, I'm not in support of the project in general. I'm in support of Nathan and Nathaniel and Scott. I think we have an impressive group. If there is other land in Bay City that maybe we could develop, direct them to. So I just wanted to, that visibility, and that we're going to have, if we support giving them money, we're making a statement that we support the project, and I didn't think I can.
I wonder, did the issue of the zone change come up in our earlier discussions on it? I don't recall.
I brought it up to him. I said, I'm surprised you got initial positive response from the city, which I understand says we need housing, but it does choke Bay City off. So I was surprised he felt positive in his communication with the city, because they've been adamant over the last 10 years that that property has been available.
One thing to note is that the city of Bay City has hired a consultant they've been working with for close to a year now. And they're revisiting their development code, and they're specifically looking at these areas that you have in question right now, with the intent to increase density to what they're considering a reasonable and sensible sort of modest level. And I use an image a lot, right, where you have the single family homes, and on the right end of the image you have a huge apartment complex, and in the middle is sort of those slightly above 6 units, those bungalow forts, 20, 30 units per site. That's kind of where this fits in. It does push that middle density range a little bit, but it does also fit in, I believe, with Bay City's intent, or what they're moving towards with their planning commission and with the consultants to increase density in places where they can get more housing. Really appreciate your comments. I'd love it if there was some discussion around this. By the way, as a planner, I can tell you that density and parking are the two biggest issues in land use planning, period. I can see Megan nodding as well. She knows this pain very well. So some thoughts and some comments a little bit about this density conversation.
I have a quick question before we get going. You mentioned the fallback provision. If in fact they don't get a zone change and they aren't able to go ahead, then we would get our funds back.
That is correct, and just a quick point of order, there will be a negotiation phase and a contract where all of that is included in writing, where county council will be directly involved in that process after Board of County Commissioners make a decision. So all that is going to go in that.
And also, before we move forward, I want to check with online to ensure that you've all heard the points made by Val. Can I get a thumbs up or a nod? Okay, great, thank you. So, yes, so let's discuss that point.
I was on the Bay City Council for over 7 years. And I am aware that there were prior proposals on that property for mixed-use residential. However, it never made it past the front counter, and the developer walked away. I know at that time that the council was really pushing for, was making sure that that process was getting beyond the front counter, when proposals were being made. And I'm not sure if it would require a zone change. It may be a conditional use approval, but it would still require some sort of public input. So there might be some opportunities for public comment about specifically that project. I personally am encouraged to see something on that property developed, if it is including mostly housing. I think that's great. I think the city really needs that. So that's just my 2 cents. And I think the ask is reasonable, or at least the recommendation from the committee as well as would at least bring that for project further along. And I think they have a lot of, I like the plan. So I'm encouraged.
Other comments? I'm encouraged to give them some seed money to keep going, but also if we have a clawback provision, and if they aren't able to proceed, then I would vote for it at this point because of our ability to retrieve the funds if necessary.
I also would just like to comment that I appreciate hearing that it might be a conditional use, because I do think that's something that, as a recommending body, we don't want to, it's the unintended consequences of our recommendations and relationships with cities. And you wouldn't want to make a recommendation that inadvertently causes the city of Bay City to be disappointed in the work that we're doing because they feel as though it's contrary to their zoning and things that they have in place. So I'm glad that we talked about that and that you brought that up. And I feel encouraged just by what I'm hearing around the table from some people who have a little more information on that than I do. So thank you for that discussion.
Also, a quick point to make is that while we can't speak for Bay City or the
Right.
planning commission, I did go and speak directly with city manager Welch, as well as Mayor McCall, as well as the planner David Madison. We had lunches and talked a little bit about both of the projects within their cities. I did this for all the projects within city limits that were being proposed. So in addition to sort of doing the criteria piece and calculating things out, I circled back and just made sure that the cities had passed certain motions like were necessary to the SDC stuff for Tyler, and that they were on board and at least went through the front desk, right, for this project right here. So they are in alignment with these proposals. We don't know if it's going to be a conditional use, that's for the planning commission to determine, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We have the information I think that we need to move forward.
Really good to know. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and I think as a builder and developer, retired, that property is, probably one of the least expensive ones to develop in Bay City with all the amenities around it already. I know there's other property in Bay City, but a lot of it's hilly, ravine, road infrastructure is just horrible in Bay City. If you've ever tried to find a house there to go work on, it's insane how the roads are. And I think it would be a nice look as you're going by on 101 to have a nice new complex there. And I don't know if there's gonna be any huge commercial development in Bay City as far as like stores and business fronts. I think it's a need, and I think that's one of the best spots to quickly do it.
Okay, those online, Tom, Christian, Peter?
Yeah, I wanted to note that the affordability commitment is only 10 years, and that had an effect on my decision to rank this pretty low. It seems to me it's an early phase development with a very minimal commitment to affordable housing. And the purpose of this grant is to produce units of housing, period, but also affordable housing units for hopefully the long duration, not just 10 years to support, to use public funds to produce a private project that just moves on to market rate very quickly.
I would like to, I don't like the word push back, but I'll just counter that by saying we desperately also need market rate housing. And industries like mine and hers, we have employees that we can't recruit and retain because we don't have places for them to live. So having a 10-year window on some of these projects is not necessarily a demerit in my view, because it gives us a broader spectrum of housing types to fulfill our workforce housing needs when it's all said and done. I get it, the intent of this particular grant funding, but I also feel that the weighting of that duration, given the less than 1% vacancy rate on market rate housing right now, I feel like we need to be maybe a little bit more forward thinking right now in that context.
Another thing to share is I did also meet one-on-one with each of these developers over the last several months, as they have been approaching cities, and then cities are saying, go talk to the housing folks. So I've met with these folks, and one of the things that Scott and Nate told me when we met, and they were very transparent about that here too, in their presentation, was they intend to sell this property after 10 years, and that was baked into their very detailed pro forma that we all received a copy of. So that was why it's at 10 years and what their intent is.
Okay, other comments? Anybody online? Okay, I think, I'll ask for a motion on this one.
I'll make a motion that we, go with the finance committee recommendation of 17% for applicants in the first step.
Okay, second?
I second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Opposed. Okay. Duly recorded. Boy, we got through this pretty quickly. I give a shout out to the group of, you've all read your materials, you didn't open it for the first time. Some of you that's been in public work have had city councils that open their packet for the first time when they sit down at the table, you know, that stuff.
And
Again.
thanks to the finance committee for all.
Oh, yeah.
You just nailed exactly what I was about to say. Thank you, everyone who participated so deeply in this. Y'all are wonderful. Okay, go ahead, Ed. I think we're moving on to our next meeting.
Yeah, okay. Commissioners, oh, Tom, are you gonna do anything else on housing plan?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Ed. I do have, and I'll be quick about this. This is actually, this will serve as my report out, because we're actually coming close to the time here. This I would like to share with you. So here's where we are right now, of course, right? With our Sonoma County Housing Plan. We've been working on this for several months now. Back in June, the legislative committee came up with its legislative strategy. Those are 4 slides that are in a slide deck that have now been shared with Clatsop County, with other counties out there that are looking to Sonoma County as leaders on what they could be doing. It's been shared with partners who are interested in our legislative objectives. So what the legislative committee came up there in those 4 slides is going to turn into really a 2 to 3 page document that outlines what that committee is going to be doing over the next 2 years. It's essentially a signposting, and each committee is going to be going through that process. And that's the green line sort of in the middle, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Online is seeing this.
Can't see anything.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. All right, can we see? A verbal confirmation, I can't see.
Yes, we can see.
So just revisiting that green line there, we're looking at the SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats, and trying to develop more long-term rental or purchase housing. Legislative committee was the first one to come up with their strategy. Outreach committee also has their 4 objectives that they're working on. We're going to be revisiting these next month, so I'm priming you all now just to be ready for that. The development committee, I'm not going to steal Ed's thunder, so he'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, but they're going to be going through some of that process as well with a really intentional piece that's going to be added in early on. And the finance committee, now that they've finally gone through this very long and tedious process, they can back up a little bit, come back to the 50,000-foot view, and start to look at what their strategy will look like. All 4 of these strategies are going to come together into what is really our Sonoma County Housing Action Plan, with recommendations that intentionally link between what it is the full commission is doing and how each one of these committees are actually helping to bring forward each of those objectives. They're going to be quantitative. Remember, we're going to be working on our thermometer, and that's going to be identifying measurable units that can be termed in terms of 87 units is one of the things that we can add on our thermometer right now in terms of something this housing commission has done. The dollar amount, too, that we end up giving out. All these things are stuff we're going to be tracking over time. The executive committee is going to review all 4 of these strategies and then wrap them up into an executive strategy. And that's because, remember, once a month, the chairs from each of our committees meet to talk about high-level functions of the full housing commission. How can we grab on to something that might have come through a committee as an opportunity and bring it forward and elevate it to the executive committee and to the housing commission? This has already been very effective in the last couple of months. Once the executive committee is done with that strategy, they're going to be passing it off to the housing commission to review it, much like we did today. And then the housing commission is going to be working directly with me to come up with a final document. The outreach committee is going to have a big stake in this because just the font and the color scheme and some of that stuff needs to happen. And then once we have a final package, we're looking at the beginning of this coming year, having a full document that can be published on our website. That talks about what it is we're doing over the next 2 years, how we're going to track our progress, and what the public can expect from us. So this is a holistic strategy, it's a coordinated approach, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this next month. Any questions or thoughts on that?
I know with Sarah Absher's involvement with the other planning directors around the state and individual on their organizational group, this broader look at the legislation can be very important, and I think it'll really be positive.
That's a great point. I'll actually be speaking at the Association of Oregon Counties Conference in Eugene in November, talking about this right here, exactly what we're doing and what other communities might be able to do to think outside of the box. You all are really amazing in that we're doing something that is really cutting edge out of a very small county. You should all be really proud of the work that we're doing. That's all I have on this. Unless there's any questions, I'll go ahead and hand this off to the updates.
Okay, Outreach Committee?
Or do we need to start with Commissioner Scar?
Commissioner Scar.
Oh, I'm sorry. Don't want to overlook Commissioner Scar, excuse me. Go ahead, please.
That's okay. Sorry, I know I was a little late to the meeting here. I'm sitting in a parking lot in Beaverton. So I had an opportunity this month to attend a meeting with representatives from the Association of Oregon Counties, the League of Oregon Cities, DLCD, another county commissioner from South County, Commissioner Cribbins, and a number of city managers, planners, different folks. And what we did is we walked through the housing development process in Oregon and looked for where the pinch points were, and really tried to identify what we wanted to bring forward in the legislative session as a broader sort of, I guess, we know what we want from Tillamook County's Housing Commission, but this was looking in a broader sense of housing development. And this had been asked for by Representative Marsh. So we did the work and came out with really what I was pretty proud of, which was that, if every county had a housing coordinator like we have, we feel that we could move the dial in a lot of ways across the state. So the financial ask that is going to come through that legislative concept, at least an initial phase, is for a network of housing coordinators across the state of Oregon, much like TJ's position, to really help counties identify on the ground their needs and their opportunities, and to provide some expertise for developers who want to get involved in that particular community, but maybe are not from there, just all the different things that TJ's been working on. The other piece of it is looking at creating a statewide network of those individuals supported by the League of Oregon Cities and the Association of Oregon Counties to make sure that our learnings are shared across the state. So that, the other piece of it that was fairly bold was they said they were going to ask for $1 billion for housing. Which sounds like a lot, but there's a lot already in the budget at the state level that will be counted into that. But they said, I heard this in the meeting and I thought this really is powerful. If we're asking the people that live in Oregon to pay more than 30% of their income for housing, count the state of Oregon find at least 1% to put toward housing. So hopefully that ask will carry forward. We are meeting again as a committee in the coming month, and we will take a look at policy related issues, pieces that we would like to try to get changed in land use code that we think could make a difference. So there's more to come, but that was a great meeting that had a direct line to representative ready to put together a legislative concept. So more to come in the next month. Thanks.
All I can say is, wow, that all sounds great. Boy, a unified approach, that's real positive. TJ, when you were out, you got compliments, you missed them.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry.
You have to watch the recording back.
Yeah. Well, it's only because we have the leadership of Commissioner Scar and these folks. I'm doing a lot of work behind the scenes, but it's all because of you guys that's moving this forward, so thank you.
Do you have anything else to add under a report to us?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. That's it.
Michelle?
Yeah, so Outreach Committee has been working on compiling some updates and working on some press releases, social media. If you haven't been following the Facebook page, please do that and share when we have updates. Kristen and I are still flying solo on this committee, so we're still needing to recruit at least a member or two. So if this is an area of interest that you have, maybe what we could do is have TJ share our strategy. It really lays out the very specific types of roles and skills that we're looking for and needing over these next however many months and years we're working on this. Lots of opportunity for people to make contributions based on things that they enjoy doing and are good at doing, and maybe are already doing as part of their regular job even. So the next article is going to be about this. It's going to be the outcome of all of this and updating the public about that in various media channels. We're also working on, Kristen's working on a national trends, like what are some of the drivers of this national crisis, housing crisis. We're not facing this alone, it's statewide, it's nationwide. So that people understand the broader context and maybe are more likely to want to be part of the solution when something's being proposed in their community or neighborhood. We're going to be working on an ADU campaign and getting information about that. And then sharing updates from all of those strategic activities as we have accomplishments to share back from all of the committees. That'll get filtered from your committees to ours, and we'll package that up and put out some information. So that's the report. Kristen, am I missing anything?
No, it sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm up next under Development Committee. We are still looking at code issues, but focus is much broader now as we've grown as a group. We do still need to identify the chair, not me, and that'll occur fairly soon. The priorities list is on our agenda, and we're working on it. We're not done, I guess, with the last one to be done.
Can you talk about what that is again? And in the development committee, we know exactly what that is, but just to share for folks what the priority
Well,
is.
it's focusing on what are we gonna, obviously, what are we gonna spend our time on, and we'll have a list of action items that we will spend time on. We have a lot of potential things we could work on, but we need to prioritize so we use our time efficiently.
I think I was thinking the opportunity.
Oh, yeah, that's one that's on our list, which is probably gonna be one that is included. And, TJ and, Sarah Absher have been working on an opportunities list of sites that are strong potentials for development that we would spend time. They might be ones that would come to the top of a list for pre-development funds. We did go out, a tour with, a tour with Hacienda, who has visited with us before, and we looked at a site in, two sites in Bay City. One was an undeveloped soccer field, which looks pretty darn good, as a housing site if they found another place for the soccer field. And the other is the McCross property, and they've been into our meetings before. And we got an on-site tour, which is pretty amazing, what they have there. And then the last thing we've been talking about, we should have some results fairly soon, is the developer survey, getting feedback of issues that they would like us to look at as potentials for action items as well. And we have already got some good ideas, but I think it's still out until,
So the 15th, I might even extend it a little longer because I hear that people are out hunting and doing other things at the moment. So wait till it gets cold and I understand we'll get more responses. We have a good response to that already though, by the way. It's pretty impressive.
I hear rifle fire in my neighborhood. I know there's something still going on out there. Okay. Miss, anything else on Finance Committee?
Yeah, I think you've seen what we've been up to recently. Shared that today, but then going forward, I think the two that I'm thinking of foremost are reviewing not only the learning from this process, but what was talked about before when we were putting this criteria together, because there were a lot of learning before that. And then also seeking other funding sources for other ways to fund things that maybe didn't fit into this criteria, or ways that, I mean, a lot of things even came up today. So those are the two areas of focus that I'm aware of. Am I missing anything, TJ, or anyone else on the committee?
I'm amazed how far we've come from those early discussions about how to use grant funds. So it's really been good. Okay, legislating?
Yeah, we, last month worked on our strategic plan, identifying inputs and outputs. And one of those, planned outreach goals that we set for late October is we're working with TJ to develop a legislative priorities, for cities as well as community action, engagement groups, throughout the county, to try to figure out where we have commonality between different jurisdictions and impacts in the community. We did receive a great letter from the city of Paloma, Tommy O'Donnell, who's the city planner, about their legislative priorities with the impact of infrastructure, which aligned very closely with our priorities, as well as support for similar communities with getting some more technical development. And so we are just going to be trying to reach out to expand our network with legislative priorities. So hopefully we'll have a nice solid concept on where we're going to spend our focus on this coming legislative session.
You want to talk a little bit about, and it's okay, how we came to the idea of reaching out to cities within our community about legislative issues?
Well, essentially, we did receive the letter, but also just individually, each city, we had a discussion about, I think it was House Bill 1032 or 1030 or 1. Essentially what it did is a lot of legislation in Oregon, it kind of only covers the top 50% of population. Our county and smaller jurisdictions usually get left out because it's not, they don't want to mandate things on smaller cities, which, you know, could require financial stress, and they just don't have the time. The administrators are going in 20 different directions already, so they don't want to increase that burden. But some of those concepts and things placed in action can be applicable and adopted at the local level. And we're seeing that some of these cities want to, go down those avenues, but there's not a lot of assistance, either financially or through consultation, or even just blanket, hey, here's a template that you need to adopt into your comprehensive plan. So we are so with that discussion, we're like, maybe we need to reach out to the other cities to really see what could help them. Is it infrastructure? Is there anything specific that we can help them with? So we're going to do kind of a broad brush stroke approach to just trying to gather information from our local communities and cities, as well as unincorporated communities, on where they are seeing impacts, and as well, especially special districts. But there's quite a few networks there that we can, and they create their own legislative priorities within those individual organizations as well. But if we could hear from the local level.
I really want to credit and elevate the recent work, and one of the things we were talking about in a recent meeting was, boy, we need to go out there and share with city what it is we're doing with our legislative priorities and agenda. And I think, Megan, your comment was like, some of this stuff is going to work great, and other stuff, you really kind of want to ask them to see whether that's an issue or not. Some of the stuff might not work. And so getting the city's perspective on their legislative concepts and bringing that into our fold so we know how to communicate with them, I think was really powerful and effective. I just want to thank you for bringing that forward. Do you have anything you want to comment on about that?
No.
Show me. Okay, great. Well, thank you for all you're doing already, and having the city of Tillamook on that legislative committee has been very impactful.
At the League of Cities and Association of Counties, unfunded self-funded mandates has been the mantra, probably for a century at least. But on the other hand, some cities and counties feel left out if they can't benefit from mandates, basically. So that's where who else is on your committee, Terry?
We have TJ Pirelli, Trevor Bell, sorry, it's another T name. He works for the County Creamery Association as their governmental liaison, and he's been previously a lobbyist at the state level, so he's been very strategic and providing this huge knowledge base. And then also Marcy Halleck, hasn't been too active recently, but due to connectivity issues, but she was a local landlord and that provided a lot of insight when we were doing a lot of legislative concept review with landlord and tenant issues. And we're always looking for more people.
Committees are gonna be going through a recruitment drive soon, if you can't tell.
That's kind of what I said. Kind of what I said. And as I've been hearing on the news, you know, that the renter support is going away, and that's going to create some real problems in our county. Anybody on the internet want to say any words?
We have Kristen, you can't see her because of my technology issues.
Yeah, I just wanted to warn Carrie that Outreach is going to be contacting you for some info, because that would make a nice little story, your efforts dealing with how to adjudicate between state and local issues and the work that you're doing. I think that would be a really great little tiny article of what the Housing Commission is working on. So maybe we can twist your arms to draft something, since we are really low on staff also, and work with you to create a little PR for your committee.
Great. One last plug on outreach. Something that's been shared, in fact, TJ and I haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, but I saw something in Peter Starkey's newsletter about their award, even though it's not directly related to the work of the Housing Commission. It's strategies and funding to that end in the county. So sharing that on our social media page and getting people tracking with what is happening, I think the more we can fill in the gaps of information in people's minds about what is or isn't happening, the better. So if you come across something that's been shared and it seems relevant to the goal of increasing housing in Tillamook County, send me the link or Kristen, and we can get it plugged into our social media schedule. Yeah.
I have a question about that around clearly defining the work of the commission versus work that's, you know, all going towards this greater goal. How would the post read to make it really clear that we are celebrating one of our partners' success that ultimately feeds, would we make sure that we're...
Which program are we talking about?
So it's the what's been loosely referred to as the Homeless Million.
Oh, got it, okay.
Yeah.
So CARE is a participant in that process, but the county is leading that.
Okay.
So CARE, along with 7 cities, they're all members to an agreement. CARE is our service provider on the ground. And so part of the legislation required that the county gets the $1 million, so we received the $1 million. We're distributing the $1 million out to cities. They're each getting some funding to help with administrative tasks. We're distributing the funding to CARE, and they're gonna be hiring some staff to stand up a coordinated office so that folks who are homeless can come in and receive some services and some assistance. But the real goal here is to create a strategy. So over the next 2 years, I'll be leading this process, and Peter Starkey will be working with me as the executive director of our service provider here in Tillamook County. So the way it'll work is essentially, I'll be leading the meetings with the 7 cities in CARE, and Peter will be leading those meetings with service providers and folks that are in stakeholder groups. And so I think it's important to talk about, that is not something that's directly within the Housing Commission, it's not in your purview, but the question still remains, how do we elevate things that are related to housing? Because this is truly a continuum. You have a spectrum of people who are houseless right now. You have people who fall into that because they no longer have the money to survive. And then you have the people who are in market rate. but it is not a linear path. It is very circuitous. And people can just jump around that board at all times. And so homelessness is a focus of housing. And I think talking about it very intentionally and making sure that we capture what Ms. just mentioned a moment ago, that this is something that the Housing Commission is elevating. It is a county-led process, but it is not a Housing Commission focus. And so let's work together within the outreach committee to clarify, get that message, and get it out there the way that we want it to be.
I think the way you presented it is perfect. That would be my thinking too, to say, you know, celebrating the work of a local community partner, you know, working to, solve the housing, you know, homeless crisis or whatever. So, but.
Yeah, city by city, every city.
Yeah, and I think at some point there must be a plan for a press release about the whole project, the way you just described it, or maybe not, I don't know.
No, absolutely. I've been doing
You know,
the circuit.
you know, to be able to share that, synopsis, as part of this too, would be,
Yeah.
I think, really good.
I did draft like a slide deck and go in front of every single city council and ask them to approve this. And this took a little over 2 months of me kind of going to evening city councils. All 7 of them approved, so that's a real awesome piece unanimously. I don't know, I wasn't here for the STAR's report out, but we were both just in Bend yesterday for the League of Oregon Cities Conference, where we presented as one of the 8 pilots that is really leading the charge on some early impressive work.
So I was gonna say, I know, you know, the Headlight Herald has gone through different iterations of having reporters available and not. But I would love to see an opportunity where maybe you could be interviewed by Joe Warren or somebody who could write up the story from like a journalistic perspective that then we can all use to share out and take snippets from or reference. But it would be really great if we weren't the source that generated this story for the community, but if maybe we could use some of our contacts to help facilitate that happening, that would be pretty great. Or even the Pioneer, you know, either of kind of the major distributors of news in our community, because then it isn't that it came from the commission, but it really was a community-wide story, but then we can help share it out.
That's a really great point.
Okay,
I have a question about filling the vacancies that we have. Where are we in that process? Because I know that South County is not around the table here.
Yeah, we've got a couple of applications for both positions. Just a quick point to note is that we opened it back up. We've received 1 application for each of those. But what we did is we said, okay, let's lengthen it a little bit and open it back up and then plug it. And so we very intentionally did that within some networks and then also on social media. Really happy to report that we've received, I think, 1 or 2 more for each of those positions. We'll be going through interviewing in the next couple of weeks. Executive committee can expect to hear about that. We'll be putting together the same interview committee that we had previously. So I hope next month I'll have a more solid update on that.
Thanks, TJ.
I had some cards to share, and it has people sign. Not everybody's here today, so maybe we'll do this over the next couple of meetings, but, I know they're online, so I don't want to, spoil the surprise. But some of our, former commissioners, that are no longer members who wanted to send our thanks, their way. So there's some cards here for that.
Big shoes to fill, and amazing people that we had here with us.
what in the world for, like, within a minute of, our time?
Any public comments though?
Yeah, I'm looking for public comments. Anybody? Commissioner comments online? Jerry? Anything? Okay.
And I do have some. During our last development meeting, I was asked if I would be interested in taking the chair of the development committee. And I talked to my wife about it, and since then, our life has gotten structure to it because we were awarded by the courts to be permanent caregivers of our 3 grandkids we've been taking care of. So that fear is gone from us. So we have those children at our home now. And with that, yes, I can commit to being the chairman of the development committee.
Wonderful. With that information, yeah, absolutely. That deserves John's very well qualified, and we're very, very fortunate to have him in that role. With that being said, I will be sending out a poll for rescheduling the time. We're going to have the opportunity.
We don't have to do that. The 2 oldest are in school during Monday.
Are you certain?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll keep that time unless other development code committee members would still like to consider that. Let me know personally. Otherwise, we're going to keep it right as it is.
With it, I got 3 texts from my wife, the 3-year-old's home with ear infection and crying for his papa.
So you can hear that yelling.
I've gotta go.
I think, any last minute comments? I think we can be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Thomas, I'll get hold of you later about this.
Yes, please, that would be ideal. Thank you, Don.
It was interesting to see who it was. Yeah. What was the thought behind that?
People have to run, I will, include myself, because I'm supposed to be somewhere at 11:15. If you get a chance to sign these today, great, and if not, I'll have them at the next meeting too, and then I'll send them off to that.
Thank you for doing that, Michelle, that's really
Yeah.
awesome. Are we disconnected? Okay.
And I gotta get on.
Always good to see I'm actually staying at an Airbnb for a couple of days, so it makes it easier. And plus,
Gonna market it, yeah. And landing.
That's funny. I mean, that's, and like, one of the,
thank you, it's good to see you.
We don't know. Well, they're very seems like as you and I go. Destination.
yeah, I think
The
the
whole
whole
is
is,
an antique area.
I cannot.
We've got it where there are this huge service entity.
Well, I think,
What I want to do is have. We're gonna,
Yeah.
we're both of them going to housing. And one thing I'm gonna look at is city property in the front, but do their. And again, she is so dense in there, I think it's period. And I've had that same thing, I've had commuter properties that I make one of the old.
or you have a finance.
I am.
More than
So I'm next, you know,
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you for your leadership, though. I don't know if we got outcome.
Exactly, too. And I know, we're kind of talking in housing, you being a business.
Oh, very.
Appreciate you kind of partnering in thought and thinking.
I'll go in there and ask you.
I definitely want to go.
I don't mean to be a sticker, but that's okay.
Yeah, good thing said. It's good to do.
It's really good. Yeah, and I know that. I think it'll be fun to talk about this with you because I know how it but I think that even like,
Yeah, sure, so this is something I can send you.
but I appreciate having talked about it. I'm not trying to stop housing, but I feel like it's a little more than, and it's gonna close it off, and to close off.
7.5 times 2 is 15, yeah.
I have it.
Oh, okay.
I have a card over there. But yeah, I had a concern too, and I don't know how, I wanna, like I said, I don't get it. I'm sure I understand it. That should not happen. Why should they? Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Doesn't have to go.
Yeah, exactly. I get that, but I'm just saying.
There might be other things that you might.
City. And the folks with TJ and
Correct.
So that actually helps that, maybe not, but it can.
They get points for that. So whether they have a previous
I mean,
award.
it can still be here, right?
Well, there's multiple criteria points, right?
And
And I think you started kind of hanging out around the time we talked about why.
I come in and out and,
Yeah,
I think it was right from the beginning, but I know the region, but you, I think you commented, we're not saying, and that they ain't gonna have them, they sit in there. I'm just really thankful. But mixed use of for future.
Oh, myself?
Yeah.
So I don't really-
I don't agree.
Well, that's okay, and that's bringing up two things. And also, when my committee, and have you all. Well, then also.
Sure, I have.
Why?
I think it's recording.
There were quantitative, qualitative pieces.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
No, I don't see it.
Yeah, that was really good.
We need to get lucky in the.
All directed at.
Oh, I can tell you, well, I have you all send them a
And have those numerical factors here at line. Most of it was about the scoring. Right, and so. Yeah. They give us credit, give us information, we make sure.
Marion so much. I've got to go, follow up on
Yeah,
that.
good. Yeah.
Your subjective.
And you can't tell me that that's.
But I
Financial beginning, respect that, but anyway, we're gonna change my. Hi, Karen. Sending out.
We never got back to me on that, thing you were talking about.
Yeah, I just, no, I had to.
Watching back and I'll print it out.
I'm excited about it.